Welcome to Building a Framework and Toolkit for Indigenous Pathways into Environmental Engineering with Dr. Sherry DeVore. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So if you can go to the next slide real quick. Dak Yapi, Lakoya Tau Choko Tawi Machiapi na Es Washichua, Alexander Holder Machiapi, Malakota na Kirikidish na Ho Changda Wia Hamacha, na Han Yuan Chante Washe na Pe Chiuzapi, Mai Hade Rajra, Alexander Holder Hinigaire na Shaha Rajra Tau Choko Tawi Hinigaire na. Good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Alexander Holder. I'm a Lakota, Winnebago, Wichita, Sagapox, and Northern Cheyenne. I'm the programs assistant for the Native Initiatives team, and I would also like to have my my coworker introduce herself as well, Elizabeth.
Hello, Yat She Elizabeth Johnson in the Shia, Adona and the Shiniki A Kia Ani Nishla do Tsanajana Bashichin, Tortini Dashiche do Hola Rashanella, I got ego at the Nastan Nishla, Kota de Nasha Ado Hosdo Ishilhan. Native Initiatives Coordinator, SACNAS Dish, Nashnish. Hi, everybody. My name is Elizabeth. I am the Native Initiatives Coordinator for SACNAS. I'm originally from Farmington, New Mexico, but currently reside in Phoenix, Arizona, otherwise known as the next stop for the National Diversity in STEM Conference happening October 31st through November 2nd. Thank you all so much for joining the meeting. I will be putting in some chats into the chat box, so feel free to also engage as well. But I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, AJ.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You guys keep an eye out for the links or chats that are dropped in the chat box. We'll go to the next slide. SACNAS was established in 1973 and it celebrated its 50th year in STEM organization dedicated to fostering the success of Chicano, Hispanic, and Native Americans from college students to professionals in attaining degrees, careers, and positions in leadership in STEM. SACNAS is a fully inclusive organization committed to achieving true diversity in STEM. As the nation's largest multicultural and multidisciplinary STEM diversity organization, SACNAS creates space where all members, volunteers, and partners feel they belong and can embrace their intersectional identities. SACNAS is based out of California, which is original homelands to over 200 tribal nations, bands, and rancherias of Native American and Indigenous people. We'd like to take this time to acknowledge the original inhabitants of the various regions which we all live and work and honor the rich culture of Indigenous people across the country. And if you want to learn more about whose lands you're on, you can click the link in the chat to find out. At SACNAS, diversity, equity, and inclusion are not abstract concepts or buzzwords. They are values and the heartbeat of our programs. They're the parts of our DNA. We create space where STEM students and professionals who have been monitorized can feel like they belong, can embrace their intersectional identities, and be empowered to bring their whole selves to STEM. We encourage you to become a SACNAS member today. As a SACNAS member, you'll be eligible for a travel scholarship to attend the SACNAS NDI STEM conference and participate in our mentoring program called MOS, and be eligible for our leadership institutes. If you are a student, staff, or faculty member of a tribal college or university, we have membership support available for you. Please visit the link in the chat for more information. Also, as a new member, you will save $100 on conference registration, which is now open. Today's webinar will talk about environmental engineering and how our speaker navigated these spaces through an Indigenous lens and perspective. I would now like to introduce our guest presenter, Dr. Sherry DeVore. She comes from the Diné Nation from the community of Crown Port, New Mexico in Eastern Navajo Nation. She received her PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of New Mexico under the mentorship of Professor Jose Serrato. She was then awarded a National Science Foundation Earth Science postdoctoral fellowship to conduct research at Stanford University from 2020 to 2023. Sherry was also an associate postdoctoral fellow at SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory, investigating colloidal transport of metals in the floodplain hydrobiochemistry research focus group. With the restorative framework in mind, her current work investigates biochemical processes in the interface of water, energy, and health that affects the cycle and treatment of metals and nutrients in the environment, especially near Native communities. She is now an assistant professor at the Department of Chemical and Environmental Engineering at the University of Arizona. Sherry is the first and only Native American faculty member in the College of Engineering at University of Arizona. She's also a proud member of the Indigenous Resilience Center and looks forward to working with her community and many other tribes on environmental restoration research. With that all being said, I would now like to pass the virtual floor to Dr. Sherry DeVore.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I will share my screen. Share. Is this full screen for y'all?
Yep, that looks awesome.
Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction and for the time and space to share with everybody today. I wanted to ground and orient us with the context for my presentation today, as it is a little bit more informal and less mechanistic in nature towards understanding what the role of frameworks, systems, and toolkits could be for creating pathways into environmental engineering. So setting context, unfortunately, of the 3% of the United States population that Indigenous people comprise here in the United States, approximately 0.4% of PhDs earned in STEM disciplines are earned by Native people. And what I want to challenge is this idea of cultivating a STEM identity, and then more specifically, an engineering identity. I also want to challenge the deficit perspective about our people within engineering, to remind ourselves that our people were the old school scientists and engineers, and that we have a very unique and distinct advantage and perspective because our people have been stewarding the landscape, integrating things like dry farming and terrace farming, and there's a whole list of things that I included here from all systems and ecosystems. Modern medicine was built on our ancestral plant knowledge and was monetized by the pharmaceutical industry. So a couple examples here with the overall idea of us being engineers of the landscape using sophisticated technological and philosophical knowledge deliberately and intentionally to respond to and change our social and environmental circumstances. Okay. I also want to, at this point in my career, really differentiate between the unique challenges of entering engineering pathways. So we have this dichotomy of Western knowledge systems, white empiricism, and all of the different embedded ways of knowing within Western practices compared to Indigenous ways of knowing. And the reality, oh my gosh. And the reality is that we do have to function within these ideologies within Western practices. And then if you were to consider where higher education stands among that system, you enter this very specific, very exclusive STEM discipline area. And then within STEM discipline areas, you have engineering. And I think one of the main takeaways of this experience so far, coming from undergraduate to grad school to now a faculty member, is this a very small box that is placed upon students to have to adapt to and subscribe to a math identity. So being able to have a number of physics, 2 years of calculus, differential equations, vector calculus, chemistry, statistics, just as a starting point to even enter these spaces is creating more barriers than it is creating opportunities. And as I search for students to join my research group, they're coming from all different disciplines, but receiving pushback from the department and the college around whether or not these students have what it takes, whether or not they belong, because they don't have this math identity and background is problematic. And I wanted to say, in addition to what we all experience in STEM spaces, it is especially exclusive in engineering. So I didn't introduce myself yet because I wanted to set that context, but I'm Sherry DeVore. My clans are Ashe, Nishla, Ziltaki, Ani Bashishin, Shiche, Ashihan, Danle, Aro, Tatnasani, Dashanala, De Kutao, Sun Nishla. I am from the community of Crown Point, New Mexico, in eastern Denetka, and I am now an assistant professor in chemical and environmental engineering at the University of Arizona. I'm also a core faculty member at the Indigenous Resilience Center and finished a whole year of fellowship with the Native Nations Institute as an Indigenous Data Fellow, wherein we were trained in and centered Indigenous data governance and sovereignty, integrating that into our practices as researchers and educators. Okay, next slide. It's not advancing. Okay. I like to provide information about all the different styles of mentorship that I received, starting with the right-hand side, which is a picture of my family's ceremonial hogan in Crown Point, in an area that was known to create a lot of wood for our community. So it has a very special name. And we are located near several sites near Denetka that include where my second clan originated, which is Ani. So we have both historical and actual physical, tangible connection to our places of origin. And within the walls of this ceremonial structure here, did I receive throughout my lifetime a lot of cultural mentorship, spiritual practice, and recognize the amount of effort and dedication and lifelong learning that it takes to learn and to master several dozens, over 100 different disciplines of ceremonial practice that take lifetimes to learn. And I say lifetimes because these are carried through generations, both orally and through biophilic learning, learning by doing and with our hands in the landscape, and especially with plant knowledge. So I want to acknowledge my cultural mentors, all of the wisdom keepers that have passed on this knowledge for me to learn, to hold in my heart through my walk in this life, all of the seed and land stewards that have kept our food and cultural repositories accessible for us as Native people, all of the plant practitioners, traditional practitioners, and in general, all of the ancestral knowledge that's carried so that I could be here today. So that is really grounding me in my identity and leaning into what those knowledges mean for myself as an engineer or indigeneer is critical. With that in mind, my PhD training was under Jose Cerrato at the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at the University of New Mexico. I graduated in July of 2020 during the peak of the pandemic. So it was also a very critical time for me to look back at what my foundation and core values are as we navigate forward, what priorities are with the land, with our resources, and with our communities. That was followed by a postdoctoral research fellowship at Stanford University, where I worked with a microbial ecologist and a soil biogeochemist in the Earth Systems Department for several years on a number of projects that related understanding of microorganisms like fungi and bacteria to ecological recovery and systems that experience both burning and mining practices. And then as of last fall, I am now assistant professor at U of A and part of a very wonderful team at the Indigenous Resilience Center. And I emphasize this a lot because it's relevant for part of this story on pathways into engineering spaces. Now, what I want to ask the audience is what systems or ecologies do you feel like you belong to? And you can either just reflect and answer that for yourself, or if you feel comfortable sharing in the chat, that would be useful. When I reflected on this, what ecologies, what systems resonate for me, our body is a system, right? We have terms in our language that allude to parts of a corn plant. So we are a part of these plants, they are a part of us. And we refer to ourselves as interchangeable. We're made of the same macronutrients and the same elements. And then when we cease to exist, our bodies go back into the earth, and these cycles are regenerative. So I'm going to look at the chat to see if anybody. And for the sake of time, I think I will just proceed with this framework. And what this framework I will present today relies upon is our ability to see ourselves as part of systems, as part of a bigger whole, and lean away in a lot of respects towards an individualistic mindset, while also acknowledging our strengths when we're together, while also acknowledging how dynamic and adaptable systems are and can be. All of the land and those relations around me. Okay, thank you for sharing. I lean into teachings about water specifically and water systems because they resonate a lot with non-Indigenous people as well. If you were to think about where you call home and what homelands are for you, most likely there are waterways or ecologies in which you feel embedded. In the background of the slide here is a photo of the Bentra, which is our northern sacred mountain as Dene people. And what you have here is overlaid into the system are tributaries and a river. If you were to start with the left part of this figure, those are mountainous first order small streams that drive a lot of organic matter input and energy into this entire river system. And as you go downward,